All right, let's get to the big story tonight. As part of a third installment of steps within 3 weeks to boost the economy, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has announced a slew of measures now to boost exports and to boost affordable and middle-income housing. The Finance Minister announced an over a 70,000 crore rupee package for the exports in the real estate sectors, including setting up a stressed asset fund as the government continues with firefighting measures to pull up the economy, an economy that is struggling against a 6-year low rate of growth and lakhs of estimated job cuts due to low consumption. Listen in to the Finance Minister earlier this evening.
The RODTEP, the new scheme which comes into effect from 1st January 2020 for textiles and for all other commerce-related products, will more than adequately incentivize exporters than the existing schemes all put together. Revenue foregone projected is up to 50,000 crores. In spite of all the worries that industrial production indicators showed in the fourth quarter of 18-19, because it reached a level which was fairly concerning most of us, we see a clear sign of revival in the first quarter of 19-20 and on the second quarter, not really the second quarter, but up to July end. The revival of fixed investment is also very clearly showing a positive picture. Between 17-18 and 18-19, if you compare year on year, the annual fixed investment rate as a percentage of GDP, you can see the bar chart there, and also for the quarter-wise fixed investment rate is going upwards, and you can see that it is in the first quarter 19-20 shown a clear, distinct, positive upward growth. For all over the country, wherever the housing projects are stuck because they are not complete, can now seek relief so long as they are not an NPA and not in the NCLT. So such middle income projects and also such affordable housing projects which are almost complete but are waiting for the last mile cash infusion shall benefit from this special window that we've created with a core of 10,000 crores of rupees.
So that was the Finance Minister's third press conference to announce measures to boost the economy, which grew, like I said, at its slowest pace in 6 years in the first quarter of the current financial year. But when questioned on this, the Finance Minister claimed that there are clear signs of a revival of industrial production.
Now that the growth has gone down in the first quarter, you've been listening to a lot of people trying to take steps. Do you believe you'll be able to meet your fiscal deficit target, one? And second, do you expect growth to increase in the next quarter, or where do you see it overall in this financial year?
Well, every attempt that is being made in the consultation and also in responding to the consultations like we are doing today is with an expectation that it will bring a difference at the ground level. And is also with an expectation that at least in the next quarter we'll see the numbers improve. So it is with that positivity that we are moving forward.
So the third dose of growth boosters, is it good but not good enough? Well, the Congress has called them cosmetic steps.
I can only say that the Finance Minister is clueless as to how to deal with the gravity of the crisis. I'll only say that the steps that have been announced today will not revive the Indian economy. They are purely cosmetic, piecemeal, and also convey the arrogance of the government, its indifference to the seriousness of the situation.
Indifference to the seriousness of the situation. Is that what's going on? As the government continues with firefighting measures to pull the economy out of a 6-year low growth rate, we're asking, is it enough or is it too little, too late? We have Bhaskar Ghosh from the BJP, we have Akriti Bhatia, an economic analyst, we have Mr. Gurcharan Das, economist, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, author, and let's go across to them right away. The key highlight of the Finance Minister's presser this afternoon has been the announcement that the government is setting up this 10,000 crore special window to extend funding to incomplete housing projects that are in good shape. So let's focus on housing first. Nirmala Sitharaman's mega housing push, 10,000 crores, a window for stuck projects, relaxed ECB rules, hits all the right notes, Akriti?
Well, I think the real estate, this particular thing, to be very simple and put very crudely, is like bailing out the builders. Because a lot of them have been defaulting, there have been NPAs to an extent that we can't even imagine, because real estate, of course, has been hit post demonetization and GST as well, and consumption demand has been falling because of the overall lack of purchasing power in the economy. But there's also this tendency of defaulting. If you look at projects at Greater Noida and others, a lot of these houses were built on speculative capital, and they weren't even built, and they already took up money from the consumers, and they said that you will get the ownership rights somewhere in 2031 and so on. And then they actually ran away. There are Supreme Court cases going on, be it the India Bulls and others. There are serious, so I don't know how much, is it like a stopgap arrangement? Because if you will bail them out, what happens afterwards? Will the expansion projects take place? Will the customers regain their money? So real estate is in a deeper crisis than just, this policy being able to, address it completely. So that's my take on the real estate bit.
Mr. Ghosh, real estate is in a deeper crisis. What we've seen here is an intent being made by the government. What is required is followed up action. What happens to the larger issue of demand creation? Respond here that, the devil lies in the details. Respond to Akriti basically saying this is basically rewarding the builders.
See, as far as the domestic demands are concerned, as far as the real estate business is concerned, so that is going through a crisis because of so many reasons. Of course, what Akriti Bhatia has told, that there is a speculative construction, a speculative stock building is there. Apart from that, government has also promised, after talking with all big builders association, that they should give some kind of impetus. So this 10,000 crores, whatever government is giving, is a kind of impetus in order to stabilize their downward movements. But this is an holistic issue which we have also framed up a lot of other laws in order to protect the interest of the consumer, in order to see that nothing unjustified happens or unjustified occasion happens in case of these consumer, as far the consumer protection is concerned. And as far the demand, growing up demand, government is insisting on low cost housing, which obviously will be of more demand to the lower middle class or middle class in the urban areas. So these all would work as a package, and some incentive also will be given to them. So this will work as a complete package in order to boost
Mr. Gurcharan Das, your reaction to the complete package, the announcement of this 10,000 crore special window, is that a positive one at a time when the real estate sector is sluggish?
Well, I don't think you should think of it as a real estate sector issue. Really, the thing here is the economy right now is in trouble, and so anything we can do to put money in the hands of people and create demand is good. And I myself don't like sectoral kind of bailouts, etc. That is wrong. But frankly, we are in such a mess right now that housing, fortunately, is the sector that is the most labor intensive sector in the country. So it will create the money that you put in it creates a huge number of jobs. In fact, the largest number of jobs are created in housing, especially housing for the poor. And so what you have is a good thing. And what I like actually about Nirmala Sitharaman's press conferences is that for the first time I see a finance minister who is actually trying. She's trying through these press conferences, you can tell that there's a sincerity. I cannot imagine Chidambaram or Pranab Mukherjee or even Jet Li doing the kind of things that she is. I mean, she's even saying, I made mistakes. Imagine Pranab Mukherjee saying, I made the biggest mistake in the history of Indian finance, which was the retrospective taxation. Never. You wouldn't imagine these people. So I like that. And the fact of the matter is that this is just one thing. It's one thing. Of course, she's made mistakes. I've thought the last announcement on the banks was a bad one. you know, you should have privatized one bank and you would have got a lot more improvement in the sentiment of the economy than this merger of the banks. But leave that. But all the things she announced in her first press conference and the things they're doing, I appreciate that. I think this is very fresh, and we need to do more of this.
MK Vedu also joins us of The Wire. Mr. Vedu, you just heard Mr. Das. He's looking at it, the larger picture, the macro picture. He's saying at a time when the economy is going through a tough phase, the government's constant engagement with investors, holding these press conferences, making these big announcements, this infusion into the economy, all of this sends out a good signal. It's saying that they've at least acknowledged the problem, efforts are on to fix it.
Yeah, Sarah, you know, the problem is the economy is going through a very serious set of cyclical and structural problems. Now, what Nirmala Sitharaman has done today is to address some of the cyclical problems, Sarah. It is important because, you know, more than I've heard figures ranging between 1.5 to 2 lakh crores worth of housing projects have been stuck and unfinished. The last mile has not been done because of lack of finance. So this creating a 20,000 crore fund to finish housing projects which are not in the bankruptcy court, or which have not where loans have not gone bad, NPAs. These are two important conditions. So this is very welcome, because this will start. You know, it will start the process of you know, completion of this housing and delivery of houses to people, ordinary people like you and me, and these very people who Sarah, are waiting for their houses to be completed so that they move into their houses and stop giving rent outside. So they'll save money and they could probably start consuming other things. So this really, the construction sector, the housing sector, which is also a very employment intensive sector, its package is very important in my view. The other important announcement, Sarah, which is also cyclical in nature, is exporters have been complaining now for 2 years that they're paying GST, but their refund of GST, there is no GST on exports. So what this government has been doing is collecting GST from them, but taking 6 months to a year to refund it. So their working capital is getting blocked. So the quick refund of GST to exporters will be a big relief to exporters, and I think that's another very positive step. So overall, while I concede that there are a lot of problems with the economy and a lot of structural issues which flow from demonetization, badly implemented GST, and generally this government not acknowledging the problems that have been created, but today's announcements at least address some of these short-term cyclical problems. And to that extent, I think it's positive in my view.
So to that extent, they have to be welcomed. You've touched upon, brought in the other major announcement, of course, the incentives on exports, also adding to positive sentiments. That will boost sentiments, Akriti. Your response on the exports infusions?
Yes, so what has been happening so far in these back-to-back announcements is that the government is focusing a lot on the fiscal and the monetary aspect, while the problem really is in the real economy, and the domestic demand, the domestic consumption is where the problem is. So this export, although this will definitely by no means in the shorter run turn into export-driven growth, but what can happen is a bit of, you know, domestic investment and production can kickstart, because they have said that they will focus more on MSMEs when it comes to export credit. However, Arvind Subramaniam and others have also mentioned that these export easing norms have not really worked to pick up the exports. There's nothing automatic about it. It will indeed ease a lot of things, but again, you have to have a look which is more holistic in nature. It can't be very sectoral. And if you look at things like from farm to factory, there are a lot of supply and value chains that you have to actually target, and then increase exports and all of that, and make domestic industry competitive. That is very important. Looking at real looking at the garment industry, the textile industry itself, it also needs to be made competitive through technological innovations. A lot of our markets for export markets have actually gone to countries like Vietnam and to Bangladesh because we are not adequate domestically, for example, when it comes to technological innovations. So easing of these norms through the remission of duties itself will not be in itself something which will be sufficient. But yes, you could say that it can kickstart some of the domestic production which has been failing. But again, the key question here has to be, looking at bringing purchasing power in the hands of the people, which has to be tackled separately, according to me.
Mr. Ghosh, bringing purchasing power in the hands of the people, manufacturing sector requires more than just mega shopping festivals. What is the use of a mega shopping festival if there is no purchasing power in the hands of the people?
See, if you see the data, you will find that the purchasing power of the people will be depending on a lot of other factors. Number one, the people, what they are deciding to invest into, whether there are uprise in the savings, and they are investing into different kind of instrument like bonds or into certificates or into government FD. So that has to be looked into in totality to comment on what is the purchasing power. Number one. Number two is that now the entire economy, the entire economical scale and the dimension we are trying to change. We are going into digital transfer, we are going to digital economy or digital banking systems and everything. So if you count on that, maybe more and more people are depending on that and the real figure is not coming, and as a whole you are talking that okay fine, the purchasing power is going down. Now this slump what we are talking, again yesterday I have told also, there is only for a quarter. If you see the entire history of last 2 years, or if you take the history of 2014 till 2019, in pretext of that, it is just a temporary slump. And I really object one comment that this is not a structural fatigue, or this is not a structural depressions, it is a cyclical depressions, number one. Number two, the measures government has taken in different sector wise measures, because sector wise problems are different, so the measures has to be different. And like we have set a target of 1 trillion in 5 years for the exports. For that we have an introduction of ROD, TEP schemes, and like textile industry is 2% incentive will now go into that particular scheme and will of course benefited. And then we go an industry wise prescription and we are trying to sort it out. So if you have to take in holistic terms that whether this particular slump is temporary or it is going to, like the industrial production are now on the rise, in not all sectors but some of the sectors.
All right, let's go across to that, because that's what Nirmala Sitharaman said today in response to that question by Sunil Prabhu, that industrial production is on the rise. Mr. Das, where is the finance minister getting this information from? On what is she basing it? Do you know? Because here you have Mr. Ghosh saying the slump is only for a quarter. It's a temporary slump. This is structural fatigue, and these are just cyclical depressions. Do you agree?
Well, I don't know where she is getting her numbers from, but I can only say that the slowdown is real and it's not going to be easy to get out of it. I mean, we all wish that next quarter numbers would be better, but we should not bank on it. We should not depend on it. And actually, what I like about what she has been doing is some of the announcements that she has made, especially the first and the third, this last press conference, is the fact that she is actually making announcements that will make India more competitive. This announcement on exports is really to make our exports more competitive. It's going to make the ease of doing business, and it will create jobs. I mean, we've got to recognize that we still suffer from export pessimism, something that comes to us inherited for the last 60 years. And we need to become much more positive. India's exports are really 1.7% of world exports. Now, that is pretty disgraceful.
So they're focusing on exports, which is crucial.
And the one thing I would have suggested to the finance minister in her announcement and in her future announcements is to always tell us where the money is going to come from.
Exactly.
Because a lot of us are very worried that already the numbers that we have in the budget are not really going to hold. And so there are ways. For example, you can front load the disinvestment program, and they are working hard to do some of that thing. But you need, you know, instead of a bureaucratic approach, you need a guy like Shourie out there, you know, the way he went about privatizing in the Vajpayee government. Yeah, and you need that very strong missionary zeal, because frankly there are 1,800 PSUs in the country, and 25%.
So the big impact reforms promised still haven't come. MP, last word to you. The same question I asked Mr. Das. The finance minister's inflation, she said, has been kept very much below. That's a quote, the 4% mark. She says there are clear signs of a revival in the economy. There's an uptick in industrial production and fixed investment. Would you know where she's basing these statements on? And you know, the BJP's response basically here again, despite on one hand you're seeing the finance minister coming up with back-to-back press conferences to address the issue, you have the BJP leader here in studio saying it's a slump just for a quarter, it's a temporary slump, it's structural fatigue, it's cyclical depressions. Which is it?
Sarah, as I said earlier, there is a clear structural component to this downturn which will take longer to repair. The cyclical part will repair faster. So therefore, there will be a short uptick, there could be the next 2 quarters. But Sarah, it won't be, we are not coming back to the 8% growth rate that we saw April to June in 2018, just 3-4 quarters ago. From 8 we are down to 5% in the last reported quarter. So we are not seeing a V-shaped recovery. We are not going back to 8 in the next 2 quarters as somebody was suggesting. That is impossible. There are structural issues as Mr. Gurcharan Das was suggesting. The other reason why we are not recovering quickly, Sarah, is because globally there is a slowdown following the US-China trade war. Global investors are big companies, multinationals are waiting to see how this plays out, trade war, and where they invest and how they invest, which country would they invest. So that is an additional factor. The only thing that can revive the economy from a very domestically driven standpoint is Narendra Modi's or Nirmala Sitharaman's 100 lakh crore infrastructure spent in 5 years, which amounts to 20 lakh crore infrastructure spent in 1 year. But on that, we are yet to see details where the funds will come from, as Mr. Gurcharan Das pointed out. We need to see a credible plan on how such a big infrastructure spend will happen. And this is something that Dr. Manmohan Singh also pointed out in the remedies that he recommended yesterday for the economy to revive.
All right. So, of course, yes, I think we can all agree with the devil lies in the details. Where is this money going to come from? This big influx that's been promised again repeatedly, where are the funds going to come from for that? And that perhaps calls for an entirely different show. But thank you all tonight for joining us to analyze the Finance Minister's big announcements for today. Thank you for watching. Good night.